But first, Australia's population is rising steeply, up 2.1% in the year to March, the greatest growth rate in almost 40 years, due mostly to a rise in immigration. And while the federal government has moved to reduce the migrant intake modestly in the wake of the global downturn, it has now reviewed its projections to predict the nation's population will hit approximately 35 million people within 40 years. This news has been applauded by many in business who say the growth is necessary for the sake of the economy. But others say the time has come for a serious debate on the direction in which Australia is headed. Business editor Greg Hoy reports.
I think we've got a lot to worry about.
Over the last 12 months is that we've been going through a significant spike in our population. It's actually been going up quite high, and that's been driven primarily by our magnificent immigrant intake.
Australians have got to start relating their concerns and anxieties about what's happening to the ecology of this country and the sheer ambitious scale of the current immigration targets that we've settled on.
Once they came by sea, great waves of migrant workers and their families required to build a young nation and its developing economy. But greater than the peaks of colonisation, the gold rush, the post-World War II development surge, Australia is now in the midst of an even bigger immigration boom. Designed predominantly to relieve a shortage of skilled labour in the economy and replenish an ageing workforce, the influx has lifted the population growth rate to amongst the highest in the developed world.
Australia's population is projected to grow by 65% to reach over 35 million people in 2049. That is up from around 21.5 million people right now.
Another contributing factor is a new baby boom, as the fertility rate of Australian women has risen with the economic upturn of the past decade, though the birth rate remains half that of the post-war baby boom. Regardless, the Bureau of Statistics estimated in the year to March, Australia's population rose by a record 439,000, or 2.1%. After calculating arrivals and departures, the Bureau conservatively estimates a net immigration intake of 278,000 during 12 months of global recession, while public attention was preoccupied with the relative few illegal immigrants arriving as boat people.
This year there's been political outcry because we've got maybe 1,000 people arriving by boat, around about that perhaps by the end of the year. The numbers of people arriving in Australia as residents every year, once you count permanent residents, long-term temporary residents like 457 visas, international students, you're looking at something like 500,000. So we've got our focus on completely the wrong area.
So is this surge in new Australians good or bad? The answer depends on who you ask.
We found that the population growth has been a significant factor in us avoiding the worst of our economic downturn.
According to a recent business and population monitor by Access Economics and PKF Business Advisors, the population spike should be acknowledged as one of the key stimuli assisting Australia's economic buoyancy through the global financial crisis.
Immigrants who are arriving in Australia, they need to set up home, they need to establish themselves in the country. So that has actually stimulated quite a bit of spending and consumer confidence. Additionally, there has been some significant growth in the housing and construction area. This has been driven by the fact that these population growth needs to be housed.
A lot of the growth in the economy comes from the growth in their workforce, which is independent on population growth. The states that have the strongest population growth have generally got the strongest economy.
And like every Dennis family home, you'll find plenty of space.
Chairman of the Dennis Home Construction Corporation, Bert Dennis, leading member of the Australian Population Institute, says Australia must populate if it hopes to prosper.
At the moment, we've got about 5.5 people of working age to every person that's over the age of 65. By the year 2050, that's expected to drop down to 2.5 people of working age to all those retired. Now, That's obviously not going to work. Two and a half workers supporting a lot older population, so we'll either have to double our taxation or halve our standard of living to handle that.
Since the Treasury's forecasts 2 years ago, population projections have already risen by a quarter, suggesting not only it's an inexact science, but the latest numbers could surely rise again. Of course, such projections are the result of government's own policies, and some are beginning to question whether those policies will solve Australia's problems or eventually add to them. The Australian Conservation Foundation is calling for a long-term policy to ensure sustainable population. Others simply want greater public debate.
There have been studies on this that have established the more immigration, the more skills shortages there are, the more bottlenecks in skills you're likely to find. It's like the argument with an ageing population. 3 studies have concluded that increased immigration does nothing to counter the effect of an ageing population.
Secretary of the Treasury, Ken Henry, has also expressed concern.
The latest projections of our mid-century population are fully 25% larger, at 35 million people, than the previous official figure. And that raises even stronger questions about land use sustainability, and it raises even stronger questions about infrastructure requirements, both economic infrastructure and social infrastructure.
If you increase the population intake, our cities go out and they go up. I just challenge Australians concerned about more desalinated water, concerned about cities becoming high-rise rather than low-density or medium-density cities, to think about the fact the starting point for all of this is increased population growth.
The government says the situation is in hand and it's planning a long-term framework for the challenges ahead.
This larger projected population poses a whole raft of policy challenges and, of course, I believe, brings a whole raft of opportunities, quite apart from the age structure of our population. Careful environmental and infrastructure planning will be required to support this population. But of course, when we get it right, population growth can be an important contributor to the overall economic well-being of Australians.
Indeed, there are many cheering the prospect of a more populous Australia, and not all of them in business. Former Democrat Senator Andrew Bartlett, winner of this year's Migration Institute of Australia Award for services to immigration.
A significant part of the migration intake is driven by the economy, so either we have a future for our kids that has far less economic prosperity than what we're currently used to, or we go insular, protectionist, and reduce our prosperity and options for our kids. That will mean challenges for the environment, there's no doubt about that, but that's why we've got a plan for it. And rather than just pretend that we can just close the doors and everything will still be fine.
As our population has grown, our standard of living has grown, and therefore we're now able to have the money, generate the money or the economy to enable the repair and enhance the environment.
The underlying rate of increase, that's the fastest rate of population growth in the industrialised world. It's the population growth rate of a country like Saudi Arabia, not of a developed, mature economy. That's far too ambitious for my comfort. I don't think the ecology of the country can take it. I think the economic argument's actually cut in the other way.